My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make these moments of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. In today's Gospel passage, we find Jesus talking not to some Jews who rejected him, but to a group of Jews who believed in him. He needs to explain something to them because even though they believe, they still have a lot to learn. And Jesus, I like to hear that. Sometimes in the Gospels, we get the impression that the people who met you just believed in you, and then everything was just perfect, and that's that. And that's definitely not the way it is for the rest of us. So it's good to know that it's been like that from the beginning. I suppose for a lot of them, their difficulties would have been different to ours, and yet at the same time very similar. And that's certainly what this gospel passage seems to indicate. It starts like this. To the Jews who believed in him, Jesus said, "If you make my word your home, you will indeed be my disciples. You will learn the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered, "We are descended from Abraham, and we have never been the slaves of anyone. What do you mean, you will be made free?" Jesus replied, "I tell you most solemnly, everyone who commits sin is a slave. Now the slave's place in the house is not assured, but the son's place is assured. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." I suppose that freedom has always been of paramount importance in people's lives, and it certainly is nowadays. In fact, nowadays it seems to be the most exalted thing, but perhaps not in the right way. It's perhaps tragically ironic, Lord, that we who exalt freedom so highly fail to understand it so poorly. Just look at that all too common misconception of religion. Many people think it can't be good because it puts limits on your freedom. You don't want to have to put up with that morality stuff. It's also easy for people to feel that growing up Christian in a rather licentious world like the one that we have. To be honest, I felt that myself when I began to consider converting. I looked at Christianity with a certain displeasure because I knew that it would impose certain limits on my freedom, limits I didn't like too much. I remember one time in particular that I was going home and I went past a billboard that was promoting something immoral. I won't say what, but suffice to say it wasn't good. And for whatever reason, it felt like a kick in the guts. It was as if someone were just taunting me, saying, "You think of all the fun that everyone else can have, but you won't if you become Catholic." I don't know why it hit me in that way at that moment, but it hurt. I really didn't want it. I wanted my freedom. Or more to the point, I wanted to be able to enjoy whatever fun I wanted without any cost. The thing is, thanks be to God, I kept moving forward because having the truth was necessarily going to be better. I didn't understand at the time how much better it would be, but I'm always discovering that more and more deeply with time. The truth is, you look at people without faith, and it can seem like they get a free ticket, as if it were like, well, you do whatever you like because you don't believe anything, or do whatever you like anyway, have all the fun you like, even sinful fun, and probably God, who's all good, is just going to forgive you anyway at the end, so enjoy everything however you want to. Of course, in reality, it's not like that. The church is definitely the path both to happiness and to heaven. The problem is that people don't realize that sin always has a cost. Several costs, actually. And while we don't have time to talk about them all, one big one is, ironically, the loss of freedom. Truly, Jesus, I have to thank you a lot that you got me through my personal doubts and taught me so much about what true freedom is. It's having true freedom that doesn't just let us do what we want, but that also lets us feel free. That's the thing with freedom. We all long to feel the joy of freedom, but if we look for the wrong freedom, we don't feel free, no matter how much we chase that freedom. Freedom, after all, is a word which doesn't mean the same thing every time we use it. One thing is the fact that we are free, that we have free will and can choose to do what we like. That's freedom in its first and most fundamental sense. But then there's a second way, the way that most people perceive freedom, which is what I'm allowed to do, whether I'm allowed to do something by law or by the dictates of any other authority, be that campus regulations or parents or anything else. People get really hung up on this second kind of freedom. They feel that they can't really have the joy of freedom unless they are permitted to do whatever they feel like. Therefore, constraints seem like an impediment to happiness. Now that is obviously an enterprise destined for utter failure. It's not only impossible by law for everyone to do whatever they feel like, but it's physically impossible too. It just can't happen. But people get hung up about it, like, I need to be allowed to do this or that in order to be happy. And then there's what I'd call the third freedom. It's the one that no one talks about, tragically, and it's the most important. And I think, Lord, is the kind of freedom that you're talking about in today's gospel. That's the freedom not to do what we don't want. The freedom of a person truly in control of their own actions. Jesus, when I hear you say, I tell you most solemnly, everyone who commits sin is a slave, I understand you totally. When we're battling against a sin that constrains us, we suffer precisely because we find that we can't choose not to do something. That's a real enslavement that actually constrains our will, our freedom, the first kind of freedom. And we feel it. Anytime that anyone is battling against a vice that they just can't conquer, they feel enslaved by it. That's why I think the best definition of a vice is not the kind of thing you find in a dictionary, but a simple reality. A vice is something that you cannot not do. Despite all your desires to the contrary, you just can't seem to fight against it, and you end up committing the same sin again and again. It makes a person feel very demoralized, enslaved. Now, all vices have their solutions, but that's a topic for spiritual direction rather than for our prayer today. But if you are battling with any particular vice in your life at the moment, I really recommend that you go to a good priest and ask him for help to conquer it. There, with the right guidance, you can become truly free, more free than you have ever felt before. Strangely, we feel that freedom even though we'll have defects until the day we die. Listen to Jesus' words. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. Against all our defects, against all the things that we struggle with, God stands with his determination to set us free. Lord, give us that freedom in our lives, the freedom that comes from both following the truth and from knowing that against whatever defects we might confront, you yourself are determined to set us free. Our Mother Mary, without original sin, you must have felt the full joy of freedom. Help us to taste that in our lives as well, as we draw closer to your Son. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations which you have communicated to me in this time of prayer. I ask your assistance in putting them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.